Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. The board has already met in executive session, and we saluted the flag there, so we're going to start with the roll call, please.
Mr. Byrne? Here. Mrs. Swerner? Here. Mrs. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Salmon?
Here.
Mrs. White?
Here.
Mrs. Richmond?
Here.
Mrs. Korn?
Here.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Here.
Mr. Syatt?
Here.
Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Madam President?
Thank you. I'm just going to point out the statement of public notice to everyone. This board meeting was advertised as required by the law. There are 2 times during the board meeting where we welcome input from the public. The first is about agenda items, and then later in the meeting there's a public comment on non-agenda items where you can speak on anything that you would like to speak about or ask questions. The meeting is being recorded, so just wanted to point that out to you. If you do come up for public comment, please sign the clipboard with your name and address and tell us your name and address when you come up to the microphone. We usually limit comments to 5 minutes when members of the public come up. If you have more to say, you can always email us later with all of the information that you want us to have. Okay, so now we're up to the student representative, Maddie Athanasio. Is that right?
That was
Okay.
perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that I spoke a lot about school spirit last time I was here, and we had our huge spirit week last week, and it went over really well. We had the spirit days, we had the pep rally, and we had a huge neon game playing Hillsborough, and the Ridge football won, and they also, after that Saturday, we had the homecoming dance, which was very fun. And the marching band came in first place at, I think Franklin High School marching band competition, which was a big accomplishment. And football won against Hillsborough and then Franklin. And also, the last time we spoke, girls soccer hadn't been doing too hot, but we've come back. We've had a few wins under our belt since we last spoke, and we won our most recent county game, the first round of counties. So we're very excited to move forward with that. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Lots of good news. Does anyone have any questions for Maddie? No? Okay, thank you so much. We are going to go down to the audience for the first presentation about park scores. So the board members are going to move down there.
Hey, hello everyone. So this will be my first park scores report. I'm going to share some information with everybody about the park scores that were released late summer, and sort of our plans of what we will, how we will look at the information and what we'll do to improve instruction and achievement in the district. So as far as state assessments goes, there's a few points I wanted to summarize here about state assessments. This is our 4th year where the state is using park as the state assessment, the required state assessment. There are some changes coming up I'll speak about in a few minutes, but for now that's what we had in spring of 2018. Again, our overall results remain very good and very consistent with past performance, but I'll certainly point out some areas that are opportunities for us to examine and to grow. We did note a significant increase in student participation in spring of 2018, particularly in the class of 2020, which I'll speak about when I get to that slide. And then last Wednesday, the Department of Education sent out proposed changes in the regulations that will impact our testing schedule this year. They are not official yet, but the State Board of Ed did vote on them, so it looks likely. So I'll share those at the end of the presentation. It's going to be a lot of numbers, so those of you who like numbers, this will be interesting, hopefully. The first couple of slides that I'm going to talk about now compare student performance in ELA from 2017 to 2018 in all grades across all achievement levels. So you can see how the percentage of students who earned a 1 on the left, not yet meeting expectations, between 17 and 18 in all grades. This is how this slide works. Percentage of students in the 2 range, all of these students are below proficiency. The 3s and then the 4s and the 5s are all passing. So I'm going to point out some notable numbers, right, where you see something notable in terms of being significant improvement or an opportunity for growth. So the one area that is noteworthy is grade 11 ELA on the bottom, where you see an increase in the percentage of students who earned a 1, and you see a decrease in the percentage of students who earned a 5. Right, so when you look deeper into the data, what we know is that only 26 students took this assessment in grade 11. None of the students in AP Lang took the Park ELA 11 because they had a waiver. So 26 students took it, which would explain a variation in scores. In mathematics, you have the same slide, right, comparing spring 17 scores to spring 18 scores. 2 notable areas are going to be grade 8 and geometry, right? So in grade 8, we notice that our achievement in the 4 ranges went down from 39 to 27%, and the 1s went up slightly by about 6%. So that, for me right now, poses an area to examine further in terms of thinking about why grade 8, that's 101 students. So it's still not a huge number of students when you think about the fact that we have 450 students in the grade level, right? And a good number of the students are taking Algebra 1 and geometry. So that's an area for us to look at. With geometry, you notice that there is a decrease in the percentage of students who earned a 4 from 70% to 50%, and an increase in the percentage of, the numbers over here didn't change significantly in the same way that this happened. And so this I attribute to the percentage of students in the class of 2020 who took the Parks test last year. So there are 97 more students who took the geometry assessment between the spring of 2017 and the spring of 2018. So 100 more students took it in the sophomore class. So we think that would explain a shift like that. So now the next 2 slides take these numbers and kind of combine them and compare them to the state. So on the left, you see the percentage change between 16 and 17. So the students who earned a 1 or a 2, the percentage either went up or down, the percentage of students who earned a 1 or a 2 in grades 3 through 11. And then the percentage of students who earned a 4 or a 5, whether it increased or decreased between spring of 17 and spring of 18. So that's a lot of information. But what you're really looking for is increases here, right? The percentage of students who are passing going up, and decreases here, the percentage of students who are not passing going down. So again, the same information is notable, right? The ELA 11 percentage of students in the 1 or 2 range went up at a greater rate than they did at the state, which I think can be explained by what I said. And then there is a decrease in the percentage of students in 7th grade of 7%. So that's not above 10%. It's not alarming, but it's certainly something we can talk about within the math department. Everything else looks pretty consistent. That was, I'm sorry, I have to go back. That's ELA. Sorry, I meant 7th grade ELA. In 8th grade in math, does line up with what I said before, right? The percentage of students on the geometry test in the 4 and 5 went down by 18.7%. Compared to the state, though, we are still well above the percentage of students in the 4 and 5 range of 0.3%. And grade 8, the percentage of students in the 4 and 5 range went down by 11.5%. So I again say that's an area for us to look at that is above 10%. So the next 2 slides talk about participation rate. This kind of jumps out right at you, right? The 10th grade students increased in English by 293 students taking the assessment from last year to this year, which almost accounts for the total increase. And the same thing in math, right? 200 more students taking Algebra 2 from last year to this year. So the participation rate went up because for the class of 2020, it was required for graduation. Keep that in mind. Okay, the next slide is comparing our performance on the assessment in the district with the performance across the state of New Jersey. Go back one page. So if you scan and you compare district to state in all grades, the district percentage at each level, if you look here, they are all greater than the state percentage, except ELA 11. The state has a greater percentage of 5s, by about 1%, 1.3%. In mathematics, similar, we are above the state average in every category for students who are passing. All right, so the next 2 slides now compares students who passed, the percentage of students who passed at each grade level, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This is in English. State compared to the district, and then it is also broken down by building. So you'll notice that we more than double, right, our passing rates when you compare the state to the district assessment scores, sometimes even triple. And you do notice there's variation across buildings, which provide our building administrators and our math and ELA supervisors with opportunities to look at those scores at grade level meetings, PLC meetings, professional learning community meetings, and kind of talk about areas where they can explore the curriculum and improve. But even across all 4 buildings, we are doubling the state passing rate. So that's all good news. In math, it becomes a little tricky when you're looking at anything from grade 7 up, because in grade 7, you have students taking either grade 7, Algebra 1, or Algebra 1. In grade 8, students are either taking grade 8 Park, or they're taking Algebra 1, or they're taking geometry. And in the high school, we have kids from across all grades taking Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry. So the next couple of slides, we are reporting out the information, the passing rates by subgroup. So a subgroup is a population within the district, across the entire district, of greater than 20 students. So we're reporting out these subgroups, and we're looking at the passing rates at or above the state standards in each subgroup. And you will notice that they're all above 50% in every subgroup. This is ELA and math. So this is grades 3, 4, and 5. You see the total number of students taking the test as well. This is grades 6, 7, and 8. And so as I noted to you before, right, we looked at grade 8 math as being an area to look. We have 101 students, and in the subgroups we can look a little bit closer, but those are very small numbers of students when you're talking about 22% of 100 students. And at the high school, similar, Algebra 1, Geometry Algebra 2, and then ELA 9, 10, and 11. So everything but that grade 11 ELA is above the state 50% passing rate. Okay, so there was a little change in science this year. The state was piloting a new assessment after the full implementation of the New Jersey Student Learning Standards in Science. So the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment in Science Field Test was administered last year in grades 4, 8, and 11. So all the students took it who participated in the assessment, and then late summer, but in September, it was confirmed that none of the scores would be shared with the district. So we won't get any information on that assessment from the state because it was a field test. So we don't have any information on how our students did. If you think about how we've done in the past, our performance has been really strong. So then what are we going to do with this information? Obviously, there's a few opportunities to dig deeper and figure out how we can improve instruction or look at the curriculum. But some specific examples of how we've used the data so far are up here right now. So in ELA, there was a revision in grade 6 this past summer where they did use PARC data to provide students with more practice in the area of summarizing historical or informational text, primarily historical documents, when there's no opinion included. So a very targeted area based on PARC data that was low on that one strand, lower on that one strand. They also use the scores to make placement decisions for students in essential elements in ELA and instructional support from grades 4 through 12. In mathematics, multiple measures were used, but also PARC, to identify some students in need of additional support in their ESL academic support class in mathematics. And so a teacher is pushing in to help those students so that they're not missing mathematics instruction. They're getting extra mathematics instruction during their ESL time in the middle school. Within the special education program, this is the second year where they're using some data to provide additional mathematics support, developing the student skills mathematically in their academic support classes, again, not being pulled out of math class, but getting additional support in their academic support class. And then we have administrative discussions on growth score calculations. We talk about how they're calculated, and we drill in at the administrative level, at the teacher PLC level, to talk about how we can improve student performance. So that's it for data. I'm going to talk about what we know right now about PARC testing for 18-19, which isn't a lot. As I said last Wednesday, this came out. It's proposed changes to the regulations. So they have not been voted on formally yet, but it's looking like this is what they will vote on. The amendments are on the right. So they're proposing to reduce the number of assessments at the high school from 6 to 4. So it would be ELA 9 and 10, and an end-of-course math assessment in grades 9 and 10. Algebra 1, geometry, and Algebra 2, some combination of those three subjects, depending on what the students take in grades 9 and 10. The graduation requirements remain ELA 10 and Algebra 1 for students. However, they're going to maintain the menu of options students can use to meet the graduation requirement to expand beyond the ELA 10 and the mathematics Algebra 1 assessment. So similar to what's in place right now for the current senior class. There's a menu of options, the SAT test, the ACT test, that can be used to meet the graduation requirement is a proposed change to the regulation. There is also an opportunity being included in the regulations for students to reassess, which doesn't exist now as part of the regulations. And I think it's in here as well, maybe it's on the next slide, that is going to change the way in which ELL students are required to test. And so in their first year, they will not be required to sit for the test in the high school like they have been required to now. So this is kind of a summary of the changes that are proposed. We won't be calling it PARC anymore. I'm not sure what we'll be calling it. What's that? Have a contest? That's a good idea. I'll tell him you said that. Okay. So, just in conclusion, this presentation will be posted, I think, if we can, on the website. And so there are some links to resources for parents if you want to dig deeper into what the PARC score reports mean and how we use them. I think that's it. Yep. So, board members, do you have any questions? Karen? It's not in Spanish. It's not in their native language. It would be in English. I would add to that, though, that we do have some tools at our disposal that will allow the teacher to assess them in their native language. Not all languages, but in some, and that's getting, more extensive. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Nick.
I have one question about this, the very first slide after the first page.
After the summary?
With the numbers, English language arts literacy percentages. When looking at this grid, is it correct to say, I'm focusing on grade 9, meeting expectations, level 4, for 2017. Is the group that has the 48.6%, is that the same body of students that has the 36.3% in 2018? Is that the correct way to read that?
So on this chart?
Yes.
So grade 9.
So grade 9 in
In
2017.
2017, 48.6%
Right.
of students.
So then the following year, I'm just wondering if that isn't a little bit of a cause for concern.
The following year? Oh, in 10th grade.
So they would be the 36.3%.
I see what you're saying. You're following the cohort. You're saying that in, hold on, I have to think about this one. In grade 9 ELA, 48.6% were proficient. in
Right.
before. Now
And-
this year in grade 10, it's 36.3%.
Well, obviously, it's a completely different subject.
Remember too, 200 more, almost 300 more students took the assessment than they did in 9th grade.
Right, so even in that grade, because that's the 2020 group that has
Correct.
had the cloud over their head.
Do you follow me though?
Yes, I see that
Go
they
ahead.
went up, but not, when I did the quick math, not by the difference. So, yes, that's a good point. Anybody else?
So when you say you have to dig deeper into the math scores,
Sure.
okay, my question is, when you dig deeper, do you look at what were their grades? Because I would argue that their score on 1 or 2 days of an isolated test shouldn't be more important than their overall grade. So for those kids who are doing poorly or not passing, does that correlate to their grade? Or are they getting strong grades, they just aren't testing well?
Yeah, we would absolutely look at that, as well as their performance on other assessments.
And then my other, and I'm sure you don't, because I don't think anybody has to answer this, but what I find confusing about this new information for testing is when it talks about for the coming year and on, that the testing is a 9th or 10th grade math test, but our students take those courses in 7th and 8th grade. Does that mean if they take them in 7th and 8th grade, they're done? Or now they also have to take whatever
So,
in
we
nine-
don't know.
Right, that's-
This is what came out of the state, word for word. One would assume, like it happens now, but we wouldn't want to assume anything.
Right.
It is confusing. I would agree with you.
When I was looking at the, when you were saying the data-informed decisions, now we're talking about, you can only compare 2017 to 2018. Is that correct?
Some of these are over multiple years, right?
But they're all different. They've never been the same. Is that correct? So
So that's why it's
so it's really
one.
statistically a mess. Is that correct to
No,
say?
I don't think so. We're
Well-
looking at very slight variations, right?
Okay,
So-
but you can't really compare year to year because all these testing has been different. It's been
It's very
twice a
difficult
year.
to-
It's changed almost every year.
So the evidence statements do become useful, right? Because it does drill into very specific, like what I said about ELA. It's very specific skill.
But we're talking about, but this
And
is
we
like a
can
whole
look at
year
that,
later.
and we can look at that and how they perform on that skill area on other assessments as well. Do you
But the
see
kids
what
are out of that, the kids are done. So you're looking at that, and it's great to know, but now they're in a whole nother
But
grade and
those
class.
evidence statements carry from year to year. Like, you're right, the questions might be different, the organization of the, but the skills that they're assessing remain the same. So you can look across multiple years and see a weakness in, I'm just going to say fractions, for example,
For one kid.
or for cohorts of kids.
For cohorts.
You can do that, right? It takes
Oh, okay.
looking at the evidence
So you can
statements that
tell
come
if,
with the score
say
reports.
something's not working that you're teaching,
Correct,
but that's the only thing you can really tell.
right.
But then I find it, since these tests are, I don't know, they haven't really been proven to do anything, as far as I'm concerned. So you're using them to determine individual student placements for ELA. I mean, you're talking about a test, like kids could,
But you know that's in conjunction with other
with
measures,
with all other
including the
things.
teacher's
So I mean, what's the
input.
percentage of
Right.
this test that you use to determine that?
I would have to, like, check in, but I don't believe there's a percentage. There is a discussion had about students that we're recommending for instructional support. That is
Yeah.
based on a compilation of their performance on the local assessments that we,
The one for the teachers and the, like,
you mean the teacher scores?
no, like,
No.
that the teachers have made up, or are you talking about just the teacher assessment,
Yeah.
not just the park
Right.
scores?
What's the question?
Just like, because it's determining individual student placements.
Right, not by itself.
No.
I mean, no, that's
Well,
not
I
what I
know
meant
that,
by
but I mean,
that.
how much,
It informs those decisions, though, right?
Okay.
We are looking to get kids to be meeting or exceeding expectations, and so it informs those decisions. We wouldn't not consider it. You're asking like what
Would be like
percentage?
like a deal breaker? Like, I mean, no, because then all the kids who refused park would have been put in academic support. That's not like the only factor.
And unlike in the past, there is some element of parent choice in receiving these services as well. There didn't used to be choice when we were looking at the NJ Ask scores. You had to put students in instructional
Right,
support. Well,
so
now
now you
there's
don't
an
have to.
element of parent choice, so.
because the special ed thing, I just think it's unfair for them to be taking this test anyway, so that doesn't matter. And then, there's another thing, where you said you redid some of the, the,
No, not science, I'm on the wrong side.
not science,
This one?
like sixth grade, like yeah.
ELA.
Yeah, because of what,
So when they revised the course, part of what they looked at was some of the scores that students have gotten on multiple assessments to
Right.
make some of the decisions about where to spend their time, right? So they decided to spend more time on this based on the evidence that showed that the students
that
were
they
weak
weren't
in
good
that
with
area.
historical documents. I don't know, I mean, it just, I have issues, obviously. But the whole thing of using any information that comes from these tests for anything bothers me.
I hear
Because
you.
I just don't feel like it's up to par for our district.
I mean,
Anyway.
I think that our teaching staff, our
mean, they're
administrative staff.
fabulous.
No, but they do a really good job of looking at multiple measures. They're
And
really
just
not.
because we get you're giving this, it's October. They took this in spring of last year, so.
Right, so the grade 6 piece I shared with you, that was work that has been, developing over time. That was multi-year data.
Right.
Not just the spring 2018 scores.
You know, but you have all different kids, but whatever. Yeah, okay, I get it.
I hear you.
You know, I have to voice my displeasure with the whole situation.
I appreciate that. I know. No, I appreciate it.
Is this, all this information, this is spit out by the state?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So there's no ability to compare our park test to against other school districts? It's just us versus the state? Us
Well,
compared
the
to
way
us?
they report it, yes, you could do your own comparison to other school districts because their reports are public as well.
Oh,
They
okay.
don't report it that way.
Right, this just gets spit
Right.
out back to us.
Correct.
What do you attribute kind of the big swings for, like in the first slides with the percentages? Slide, looks like maybe 2, 3, and 4. It looks like the distributions are generally the same around the level 1, 2, and somewhat 3 area, but when you get to levels 4 and 5, there's kind of relatively large, like 10+ percentage point swings between years. What do you attribute that to?
Between years, you mean like the percentage of students in a particular group, like there's 10% more in one year who are 4, and then the next
Well,
year
like
it's-
what, like the
what you
third
mean?
graders, well, I guess, okay, the fourth graders that took it in this is ELA, in 2018,
Yep.
scored 38% of them scored 5.
Right?
And then the fifth graders that took this, 20% scored 5. So you drop that by 50%, right? And it's a similar population of students.
Right.
So what does that mean?
Pardon me? Yeah,
It's what?
it's a different test. They're taking a different test. You're not
Okay,
com-
so then, as I understand it, this came out at the end of the year.
Right.
So then that means that the 38% of kids in fourth grade that did well, we're revamping curriculum potentially based on the 20% of kids that did bad the previous, or, not did bad,
It
but like,
it doesn't happen that fast, right? We look over time. We look for trends, not one-year dips, right? We look for trends where those kind of numbers happen multiple years in a row to make
Okay.
a curricular revision.
So that-
Think about it when we see it.
Yeah.
But we don't make sweeping changes until we see multi-year trends and that it's supported with other evidence
Gotcha.
beyond Park.
okay, yeah, because I mean, even if you did a trend line for 2018, I mean, the numbers are kind of all over the place. I mean, they kind of hover, I guess, around,
Which I think is one of the arguments against the assessment
Yeah,
from some people,
yeah.
that it is a different assessment.
okay,
You can't really compare the scores straight. I mean, it is aligned to the Common Core, and even the Common Core grade bands, content are different. So what a student needs by the end of grade 4 is a different set of content than what a student needs by the end of grade 5. And that's what the assessment is aligned to,
right,
is the curriculum standards.
okay, got it,
And they're different by grade level.
yeah, all right.
I have, I guess, one major criticism, the comparison, maybe a bunch of them, the comparison of Ridge to the state is meaningless.
I agree.
I mean, it's a total waste. I think it would be important to compare it with the top 10 schools or so and see how we're comparing. Without that, I have great, and then the fluctuation year to year. I think if you had Princeton's, for example, and they dropped at the same time, then you could say it was the test. But without that comparison to other good districts, and I'm going to argue better districts, I think this is a great disappointment. So I hope they can improve the test because education is very important to the kids. And I don't think this is a good measure of how we're doing or how the kids are doing. Now, they may be doing super, but this doesn't show me anything.
I just want to say one thing that I think wasn't said yet. They're different human beings.
Yeah, they are.
They're not the same group moving
good
up
point,
to
Mary.
the next level.
Right.
So they're different
No,
people.
that's a very good point.
And when we listen to the post-secondary report every year, the SAT scores, it's not like, well, what happened to them when they took it in 11th grade versus 12th grade? They're
Different group of
different
kids.
people. So we just need to keep that in mind.
Right.
And to Mike's point, I'm not sure then that it's as concerning or significant because we have to remember. And I think you pointed out earlier, the numbers of participants were different, and that can have a significant impact.
I think it has in this district over the last 4 years. Like the microphone.
The breakdown of male, female, and the different backgrounds, I think that also is an indication of who's doing the studying and who's not. And I think there's indications that some kids are doing a better job at working at education than others, and that concerns me as well. Really concerns me. We have sports and what have you, traveling 20 miles to play as a 10th grader in a sports game, and studying is not high up on the list of things in some groups.
So I just wanted to add, thank you very much, Kristen Fox.
Thank you.
Appreciate your doing that. I know that Kristen presented a slide on subgroups, and one of the things that she and I were meeting about
me to go back to
last week, and right, if you want, basically was the evolution of the sample size of subgroups having changed over the years.
happened to it?
It was 40, then it was 30, and we believe for this year it was moved to 20.
Oh,
So.
from 40
I think it was 40 down to 30 down to 20.
to
And
make a subgroup.
to make a subgroup. It's very
Oh, I'm
small,
not
and it
sure.
would appear as though that is being done at both the school level and district level. So you might not have a subgroup at any of the schools if you're doing a school level analysis, because you need 20. But let's say in our district, we have 6 schools. So if each school had 4 students from a particular subgroup area, then as a district, I think we would be evaluated on that subgroup as a district. So it depends on whether you're looking at it at the school level or the district level. So we're going to look at that, and we may update this slide if we need to add a column for any more subgroups. We'll do that before we post it to the website. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very short presentation, and we ran hard copies for it for you.
Now? The green light's on. Okay. I wanted to thank Kristen for the presentation. I know how frustrating it is dealing with the state and all of its changing requirements, so I'm sure it was not a fun presentation to have to put together, but thank you. And obviously, we'll stay tuned for any new information that we get from the state about the requirements going forwards. Okay, so we have a second presentation about the HIB self-assessment report. Mr. Syatt?
Thank you, Ms. McEwen. So continuing with our numeric theme for this evening, we are going to shift to our requirement under the HIB law, which is that every district in the state of New Jersey must submit a self-assessment of programs from the previous year. So just some quick background on it. The Department of Education requires that every school system with its school safety team, so that's members of the guidance team typically, and the assistant principal, they review the programming from the previous year, and they have to self-score, so that's why it's called a self-assessment. They're scoring multiple indicators, which I'll quickly review with you this evening, and they come up with a score out of 78 that is an assessment of how well they followed the ABR, the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights. And so this has been going on for several years now, and then what happens is that we certify and we send that in to the state of New Jersey. They review those scores. Sometimes they will ask us for backup on those scores. Other times they certify those scores, and they are then creating what they call grades, HIB grades. Those grades don't come out until the spring. So the grades for the 2017-18 year won't actually be certified by the DOE until May. That's when we got the report this past year. So what we're doing this evening is sharing with you the self-assessments that were performed by the school safety teams so that you have a sense of how well they thought they did in following the ABR, the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights. So just to quickly go through the slides, as I said, this is required. We've been doing this now the last several years. The elements that each school safety team are supposed to assess are on that third slide, which is the 8 core elements. So the HIB programs and approaches, this speaks to obviously the programming in the school, but also any innovation after they look at trends in HIB data. So what the safety teams are supposed to do is look at the recent results of investigations, obviously without student names. All names are redacted. They're really just looking at incident types to see if there are patterns and whether or not they can come up with some preventative measures to try to curb or even prevent HIBs. This, I will tell you, is the most challenging area, so most schools will not give themselves the full 15 on it because we always feel like we can do a better job in this area. And so the next one is training on BOE HIB policy. This is something that all staff are required to do as part of our annual training for the district. So This one is generally something that we earn our points for because this training that they're doing is something that is verified and certified by the state of New Jersey. So all of our staff do that. Other staff instruction training programs, these are any incorporation we have by our SACs, our student assistance counselors or guidance counselors, where they're speaking to students or staff about HIB law, or HIB prevention. And so that's the other staff instruction training programs. The fourth speaks somewhat for itself, and it's good that Kristen's here, is curriculum instruction on HIB and other programming. So oftentimes this is done in our health and PE classes where we talk to students about HIB, or it might be where we have our SACs or guidance counselors coming into classes and speaking to folks about it. It might also be done at the beginning of the year when the class meetings are held and the principal, assistant principal, or this year I know we had our SACs come and speak to the student body as well. HIB personnel is really my area. We ensure that all buildings are staffed with an anti-bullying specialist. That person is identified. We have a school safety team. There is an anti-bullying coordinator, that would be me, and that we are following all protocols, including reporting, including investigative techniques, and that is something that, generally speaking, we should be doing a good job with. Number 6, school-level HIB incident reporting procedure, that it's very clear how the HIBs are to be reported for both students and staff, and that we have a very risk-free procedure in place, meaning that folks feel comfortable reporting a HIB and that all staff know the procedure and it's consistent across the buildings. I will tell you, all of them are important. This is extremely important for us. The next one, HIB investigation procedures, that are, again, our investigative procedures are very clear, consistent, and that all HIB reports and investigations are reviewed in central office, either by Mr. Markarian or myself. And so when those HIB reports are written, we are reviewing those HIB investigations. We might have questions, and we're speaking to the anti-bullying specialist about those investigations. And then lastly, you're going through it right now, and that is that we're reporting out on not just the HIB self-assessment, but the board might recall we do those presentations where we'll talk to you about programming, and we'll talk to you about violence, vandalism, and code of conduct. But really, this speaks most to HIB reporting and programming, and that we're reporting out on that, which we do a couple of times a year. And so there's a total of 25 indicators. There's 8 elements, and then within those elements, there's several indicators for a total of 25. And so what the school safety teams are doing is they're scoring each of those 25 indicators on a scale of 0 to 3. Obviously, 0, not good, does not meet requirements. 1 would be partially meets requirements, 2 is meets requirements, and then 3 is exceeds requirements. All buildings who scored and have been doing this, because we would be identified in areas as an area of need, would be 2 and 3. All of our areas were scored 2 or 3, meets requirements or exceeds requirements. Generally speaking, most folks were in the 2, not 3 area. We always feel we have room to grow. The highest possible points any building can earn is a 78. And what I did now is share the numbers with you. I won't go through all of them with you. What I will do is do a comparison for you, though, and share with you our scores this year as they were compared to last year. So our scores this year, if you look at that last slide, and I'll give you a reference point here. This year, Cedar Hill scored a 76. And last year, Cedar Hill had a 77. And one of the things they identified at Cedar Hill is that they would like to do more in that area of preventative HIB, which is to look more at incidents and look at patterns and see if there's ways to, if not prevent, talk to the staff about patterns that they're seeing with HIBs and HIB investigations and HIB incidents. Liberty Corner had a 77 this year, and they had a 77 last year. So something to be said for consistency. Mount Prospect had a 76 this year, and they had a 76 last year. Oak Street, 76 this year, and a 76 last year. William Adden, 76 this year, 75 last year. And they went up in that first indicator because I know that the school safety teams there have started to look at incidents and trying to look at patterns because William Manning and Ridge, we tend to see more HIB investigations just by virtue of there being more students there, and we tend to see more conflicts that could be labeled as HIB or potentially labeled as HIB at the secondary level. And then lastly is Ridge High School. Ridge High School had a 74 last year. They're a 73 this year. In the area they scored the lowest in is that first area. They got a 12 out of 15. That was our single lowest indicator. And that's definitely an area where Ridge identified the need to do more on pattern analysis because Ridge sees the most number of HIB investigations, so they would really like to do more in preventative HIB. That doesn't mean that they're going to actually prevent, but educate and talk to folks about trends that they're seeing. So that's something that they'd be reporting to you on then when we talk to you about programming later in the year. Those should connect to some of the things that we're identifying in the needs assessment. So we are also legally required to post all of this. So once we figure out how to post it on our new website, we will be posting that to make sure we are compliant as well. So that is the brief overview of our self-assessment.
So I just wanted to add, we do also have to report out twice a year on incidences for violence, vandalism, substance abuse, and HIB as part of the new state reporting system. They renamed it Student Safety Data System, right. I believe, SSDS. So they changed the system, but the reporting requirements are similar. It's just a new software that they're using to collect the data. And I think we did it last in February. It's done twice a year. Once, usually in the winter, we'll report out on the prior spring and vice versa. So we have the next presentation has to be done before the end of the calendar year, which would reflect last school year through the spring through June 30th. So you will see us bringing that to you in the next couple of months to get that report done. And in addition, normally when we do the spring report, we also report on student code of conduct, which is something that we do annually. So remember that the student code of conduct violations might be things like having a cell phone in class or coming to class late, typical violations of the code of conduct. Those are reported separately on an annual basis, whereas the HIB, violence, vandalism, and substance abuse issues have to be reported basically every 6 months. So when we do our report before December 31st, it will be on the code of conduct for the 17-18 school year in the district, as well as the spring HIB and VVSA report. So that'll be happening in the next couple months.
Do any board members have questions about the report? Okay.
I don't have any questions. I have a comment. This is a state plan, and I just commented on my opinion of what the park program was, and this is another one that I would rate poorly, but it's added staff load. I haven't seen any indication, now maybe I'm wrong, that the HIB violations have decreased as a result of all of this extra work and chasing it. I don't think we've had a reduction. Now, I'd like to see comparisons 5 years ago to today and see whether we have had a reduction, but I don't think it's working. I think it's just another state plan that adds staff and what have you, but I think it's ineffective.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so we're moving on to the superintendent's report. There's 3 items. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. Wooldridge and Mrs. Gray, seconded. Did you have anything to say? I think they're kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah, so basically the first item, we do have to report on our school bus evacuation drills. That'll be something they're looking for in CUSAC, actually. So it's good that we've been doing that. The following two items are your acknowledgement of the information that was just shared by Mr. Syatt so that we can submit that information to the state. We have to submit those scores that Sean just went over. And then we have our usual BOE meeting report where we make you aware of any HIB incidents that have occurred since the last board meeting.
Any questions? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Swerner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes. Sorry, yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. We're up to public comment on agenda items. If you come up to comment on something that's on the agenda, could you please tell us your name and address? And you can sign in on the clipboard after you speak if you'd like. Nobody for public comment? Okay, I'll close public comment. We're up to approval of minutes. There's one item. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. White and Mrs. Wooldridge? Any comments or questions on the minutes? Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Swerner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes,
Madam President?
thank you. We're up to the Finance Committee. There's 4 items. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. Gray, and someone second. Mrs. Swerner? Are there any comments or questions about the items? No? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Swerner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes,
Madam President?
thank you. We're up to personnel. There's 21 items. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. Swerner and Mrs. Gray?
Okay. Before we vote on the items, I just want to read out the minutes from our meeting on September 21st. The committee discussed Mr. McLaughlin's merit goal attainment for the year. We also brought in some representatives from Effective School Solutions, Janet Wallach, the Executive Clinical Director, and Gerard Barone, who's the Executive Director, along with Ms. O'Connell, for follow-up questions from their presentation of what they're doing in district that they did, I believe, in our August meeting. As always, we continue to track requests for additional staff. We have authorized the running of an ad to hire an additional therapist, which we need to bring on board to comply with IEP requirements of students. We also are looking into hiring a special education part-time nurse, also for IEP compliance. One of the departmental goals that Mr. Syatt has for this year is to convert all of our HR files into electronic records. It will be much easier to access information when that's done. All the information in the file cabinets need to be scanned, and the existing staff does not have the availability to pick up this load. So he has suggested that we bring in temps to do this task. They would not be people affiliated with the district. They would be signing confidentiality agreements. They would be scanning and digitizing all the files, as well as helping with pass the trash form collection, which is yet another requirement of the state. The total anticipated cost to get this work done is $42,000, and the committee recommended that we move forward with this. And then finally, a standing item is for this year is BTEA contract negotiations. The committee discussed next steps because we will begin very soon with our colleagues in the BTEA. And that's it. Any questions? All right, I think we need a roll call.
Roll call.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes?
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. We're up to the policy committee.
We met today, so I'll be reading those out next time, which
Okay.
is, I don't even know when the next meeting, next week, probably.
Seems like every week,
Yeah.
right? Every Monday.
So,
Okay,
that's
thank
that.
you.
All right.
Curriculum committee,
The curriculum committee is meeting this coming Friday.
okay. The advocacy committee,
Advocacy met on October 1st. Mr. Salmon requested a follow-up about board members meeting with student government at each school. And Mr. McCarrion was going to talk to all the principals at his cabinet meeting to see what was the best time for these meetings to take place. The meetings will be done through with the advocacy. It made sense to do it if it fits with their schedules before regular advocacy meetings. That's good. And then the advocacy committee will be reporting out in the minutes about what takes place and the conversations that are had during those meetings. We talked about the strategic planning meeting, which was going to take place that night. And there's a link already online on our district website with the minutes and the notes that were taken from that meeting, if anybody's interested in seeing those. In terms of curriculum forums and presentations, the PTO presidents were going to go back to their PAC representatives in meetings and report back either to me or to Ms. Fox about what they'd like to see in terms of curricular-related forums and presentations at meetings. Mount Prospect did request more ELA-related presentations, especially in terms of writing, they said. And they asked that it be broken down to like K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, if that makes sense for David or whoever's going to present, or Mr. Hunter, I should say, or whoever's going to present that. And yeah, we talked about park graduation requirements, which have already since changed since this meeting because they were voted on October 3rd, and Ms. Fox just very nicely gave you a whole report on that, what we know so far. Mr. McCarrion talked to us about the website and the school communications in terms of web content accessibility guidelines and being compliant with those. So rather than getting the normal Friday folders that we get from each school, the communications will be sent out via Aspen emails. So parents need to get used to reading the SOS Express or Aspen-related emails from the principal, I guess they're generated from. And then the archives of the old Friday folders will also be accessible through those emails. The district Friday folder will still go out once a week, and those will have all of the flyers and colorful things to look at. Mr. Kraus is sending out, Mr. Kraus, for those who don't know, is the Ridge principal. He's sending out the daily announcements via Aspen to the students. We just talked quickly about the calendar, making sure that they notice that there's a traditional calendar and a new formatted calendar that's color-coded and just laid out differently for people to look at. We briefly talked about snow days and how they're going to be handled this year, which is also outlined on the school calendars. Mr. McCarrion announced that the Bernards Township Bernards Township Health Department is going to be giving the student stressor report at our October 29th board meeting, and that next year they'd like to conduct a pride survey, which combines student stressors with alcohol and drug survey questions so that they can be compared nationwide. And I know there was a lot of questions still about what the surveys, those pride surveys actually have
involved and like what we'll do with that. So hopefully there'll be more information to come about that. And then there's a whole list of upcoming PTO-related meetings. There's like a page and a half of those for anyone who's interested. Does anyone have any questions? No?
Thank you.
I can share that we should have Caitlin Kordusky here October 29th.
Okay.
And she'll talk about the Pride Survey some more, so hopefully she
Okay,
can
good.
answer some questions about the Pride Survey when she's here.
We're up to ad hoc SEL.
The committee met on September 27th, and I'm apologizing because my paper's still on the printer, so I'm working from a tiny phone. Mrs. Hudak was able to join the committee, and she assisted in some goal-setting activities that we did to discuss what the committee goals would be. In doing so, she shared with the committee, you may recall from a prior board meeting, there was discussion about bringing the United Way to William Annan to assist in character education. So she walked the committee through an exercise that some of the United Way representatives did with the School Improvement Committee at William Annan. And this included talking about characteristics. Well, first we brainstormed a list of challenges, and not unlike what we did at strategic planning this past week, challenges that face our students. And we had 10 or 12 of those. I'll read a couple of them. Academic overload, bullying, anxiety, sleep deprivation, social media. You get the idea. And then subsequently asked the committee to brainstorm some characteristics of a good citizen and or an employee in the workplace. So some of those were positive attitude, strong work ethic, flexibility, adaptability, kindness, resilience, tenacity. Upon stepping back, it was noted that the first list is more in line with the pressures that create an Ivy League mindset, and that the second list is more in line with working on social emotional learning curriculum and content. So the committee discussed several articles highlighting the benefits of including SEL in our teaching, and came up with the following goals. The committee will monitor the progress in meeting district goal number 2, which is our social emotional learning goal, and report back to the full Board of Education. The second, and this was kind of a side conversation, there was some discussion of articles relating to recent successes with rotating drop schedules in other districts. So goal number 2 became develop and implement a plan to, that's the third one. Develop and implement a plan to communicate to faculty and staff the support and concern the Board of Education and community has for staff wellness is goal number 2. And goal number 3 is make a determination as to the feasibility of the rotating drop schedule at Ridge High School. Mr. Syed and Ms. Smith spoke about some of the efforts that are already underway with regard to the SEL efforts. They discussed how bringing social emotional learning with the staff, how bringing social and emotional learning practices into day-to-day classroom learning can happen. They focused on how to create a balance so that staff can use SEL techniques to support and maintain high academic standards that we have come to expect in Berners Township. They both shared that K-5 teachers will be reading the other side of the report card and discussing that, and the 6-12 teachers will be reading Higher Expectations, which the subtitle is Promoting SEL and Academic Achievement in Your School. There was additional discussion on the possibility of creating a mock rotating drop schedule. It was agreed that Mr. Markarian would pursue some possible technical support in doing so and report back to the Finance Committee. There was the topic of increasing student awareness of student assistance counselors, which was something that came up at public meetings, was addressed. it was noted that there has been a lot of effort on the part of Ms. Smith and her department to address this concern. There's been a lot, especially at Ridge High School, including a complete redesign of the counseling suite, which is still underway. The physical space is being transformed into a more welcoming and informational space. Flyers are posted with descriptions of roles of counselors and the child study members, child study team members. Counselors are attending grade level meetings. There will be a newsletter that will be sent directly to parents and students through email, and it will be composed in a student-friendly writing style with helpful articles and tips. And once the complete redesign is finished, the office will be hosting an open house so that all the staff can come through. At William Mann, the PTO is introducing the SACs to the parents at their upcoming PTO meeting. The SACs are working with specific grade levels this year. Each SAC has introduced a bully box, and the counseling department has kicked off a Know Your Caseload effort, which will be to make sure that everyone on a counselor's caseload, every student gets to know their counselor, not just students who have a perceived need to see their counselor. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call. So a quick discussion about additional counseling support for the elementary level was concluded by saying that Ms. Smith has efforts underway to evaluate this and other matters relating to counseling, and will be reporting to the full Board of Education at a public meeting coming soon. The club activity and description document that has been long awaited from Ridge High School has been posted, and it can be found, it's under, in the students under activities, is that right?
Yes, under
Thank
student
you.
activities and then
So the
clubs.
students tab, activities, and then clubs. And the next meeting will be October 25th. Sorry for the long report. Any questions for board members?
Do any of the elementary school administrators ever come to the SEL meetings? Or they,
They have, yes.
oh, okay.
So we've had specific,
It's like truly ad
like
hoc
sort
in
of,
terms of
yeah,
attendance?
like topical. So, and if you're looking just out of curiosity, in our minutes, you can, there's a subheader that says when they visited. So I
Yeah.
think we had the principals.
Okay.
I think life for the children is very, very different than what I experienced. I hope it's very different from what you experienced. The interaction with friends down at the park, coming home, I came home for meals. I was at the park most of the time with friends and interacting. I see the kids today, they're on their telephones, they even go to empty rooms so they can talk on their telephones and interact. The parents are so involved and what have you, the different programs. I hope the United Way is the right answer. Just because they're a fine group doesn't mean they know what they're doing. So I would hope, and I think the problem is very, very complex. I would hope that we know enough about them that they can do some good.
Mike, I'll share that one of the things that a lot was said at the meeting, I tried to summarize, but one of the things that Mrs. Hudak brought to our attention is that the middle schooler of today is very different even than a middle schooler of 5 or 6 years ago, much less 10 or 15 years ago. And that is one of the reasons that they've reached out for assistance from the United Way, is that they feel like the character education program needs to be adjusted to address some of the concerns of these very different middle school students that are arriving at Annan.
Yeah, I just hope United Way knows what they're doing. That's
Not turned on. Any other questions? Okay. Liaison committee reports, you had one, right, Linda?
Yes. The Berners Township Municipal Alliance met on October 2nd, and there was some news about some new programs at William Annan. There's a new program called We're Not Buying It 2.0. It's a substance abuse prevention program for students in grades 6 through 8. and it uses prevention education strategies to reduce early first use of alcohol, marijuana, and prescription drugs, as well as bullying behavior, including cyberbullying. And the emphasis is on media literacy with newer media, such as social media, YouTube, popular music, TV, and movies. And so this program will be presented at WAMS this year. I believe it's funded by Somerset County, because I heard about it previously. And then, as you mentioned, the student assistance counselors at WAMS are now teaching health lessons to students in grades 6, 7, and 8, 3 times per marking period. The new peer educators program at William Annan is now underway. The focus in the fall is on kindness, in the winter on drug and alcohol prevention, and on mindfulness in the spring. And then some upcoming events. Tomorrow night here in the PAC at 7 p.m., there's a presentation on childhood trauma. On Saturday, October 27th, there's the prescription medication drop-off at the police department. On November 15th, there'll be an anti-vaping table at Ridge. And then on December 13th, at the Berners Township Library, youth mental health first aid training, which is free to the public. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions? Mrs. Richmond?
Can you please just repeat the date for the prescription drop-off?
Yeah, October 27th.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Sure.
So I went to the Somerset County Educational Services Commission meeting. I was a little late, so traffic, and they go really fast there. Like really fast, like a half hour. So I missed some of the meeting. But for the gist, so there wasn't anything big. They were doing the superintendent did a report on about the designation of School Violence and Awareness Week, which is October 15th through 19th. And they're doing some special stuff in there. And they're talking about counselors and school psychologists continue to enhance their skills with continued education in the area of, school violence and the awareness and HIB and stuff like that. Other than that, it was just the same stuff we've been talking about, and they approved everything before I got there. So, but they also handed out the woman wasn't there, but they were doing a HIB presentation, but I think it's the same one we've done here before in public, just regarding the rules and what the state, the training, what the state does, huh? Right. You have that? You want that? And that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else for liaison reports? No? Okay. We are now up to public comment on non-agenda items. If you come up to the microphone, please tell us your name and address, and then after you speak, you can sign the clipboard with your name and address. And yeah, and we are limiting comments to about 5 minutes. If you could please try to do that, and if you have additional comments, you can email them to us later. Okay, thank you.
Maybe she'll wait and see what people have. The first one, that's Brian Pescatore. Do you know him? Well, I see him in the statement. And then the blonde hair. Last name.
Good evening, members of the board. We are the Ridge Mock Trial team, and we are here because recently we have had an enlightening discussion with our 2 club advisors, Mrs. Fox and Mr. Kohut. During our discussion, they informed us that they might be stepping down from their role as advisors, spelling an end for our club. We asked a lot of questions, and they reluctantly answered. They explained to us just how hard they fought over the course of 3 months just for our club to get recognized for the achievements that we have had. The members of our team researched club stipends and learned that the compensation that our advisors received was not comparable to the amount of time and effort that they spent in this club. Our team is truly irreplaceable. We as a team use the researching skills that we learned from mock trial in order to approach this situation in an objective manner. This approach only let us see it the same way that our advisors saw it. It all happened so fast. It seems like just yesterday, we were out in the Somerset County Courthouse, winning the championship for the very first time. But now, it seems like our beloved club might not have a certain future. After a lot of discussion, our team members came to a decision that we, as a team, would stand before all of you, voice our opinion, and ask for action to save our team. Our advisors deserve to have their stipend increased, and we deserve to be recognized as an academically competitive team. As all of us explain to you guys what our club means to us, we ask you all to keep one question in mind. Why isn't mock trial considered a competitive academic team? Thank you.
Hello, respected board members. Thank you for listening to us today. It is much appreciated. We are here today, as my friend Leo had said, to request an increase in the stipend for our club advisors, Ms. Fox and Mr. Cohut. Each year, Ms. Fox and Mr. Cohut put hundreds of hours into mock trial. Unfortunately, they are paid the same stipend as a non-competitive club that meets every 2 weeks in the morning for about 20 minutes each time. This is unacceptable, considering that Ms. Fox and Mr. Cohut have been Ms. Fox and Mr. Cohut have been able to do for this club. Mock trial is a competitive academic club, and with hard work and dedication, we have achieved many great things. Last year alone, we were able to place 4th in the state out of 250 plus teams in New Jersey. In addition to academic success, mock trial provides us with so many incredible opportunities that cannot be found in any other club. On a regular basis, we have the opportunity to meet and strategize with practicing attorneys and compete in front of district judges in actual courts. For most of the members in this club, mock trial has also given us an idea of what we want to pursue once we reach college. As dedicated members, we have seen how hard Ms. Fox and Mr. Cohut work to make sure that we are as successful as possible. Their work is irreplaceable, and it seems a little unfair that they are not compensated fairly for this work. It is necessary that we make a change in mock trial stipend so that it is on par with other academic competitive clubs that the school has to offer. And I want to thank you again for your time. This is much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Brian Pescatori. I live at 20 Linden Drive. I'm a junior here at Ridge, and I've been a member of the mock trial team since the beginning of my sophomore year. And over the last year, mock trial has helped me to form an argument based on facts, learn about the legal system, and argue a case from both sides. This club has also given its members the opportunity to meet with expert lawyers, township and county judges, the Somerset County prosecutor, and even a United States congressman. Simply put, no other single club at Ridge comes close to what mock trial provides for its members. None of those skills would be honed, no recognition would be received, and no victories would be had without the hard work and dedication of our advisors, Ms. Fox and Mr. Cohut. 5 years ago, there was no Ridge mock trial team, but in only 5 years, Ms. Fox and Mr. Cohut not only created the team, but led it to the county championship and state semifinals, placing 4th out of over 200 teams in the state. Now, to lead us to victory, these excellent advisors put in hundreds of hours of hard work. Knowing all of this, I was stunned to learn a few weeks ago the Board of Ed only provides these two excellent advisors with a stipend on par with the advisors for non-competitive clubs like the chess club, the feminist club, and the recycling club. Now, I know these clubs are wonderful, but they meet at maximum once a week for half an hour and do not compete with other schools, whereas we meet up to 4 or 5 times each week, especially when preparing for an upcoming competition, and we actually win titles for the school as a competitive academic team. I believe that mock trial provides skills and experiences that no other activity at Ridge comes close to. The mock trial is a competitive academic team, and that our excellent advisors, Ms. Fox and Mr. Kohut, deserve to be paid a stipend consistent with other competitive academic teams. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kira Fulham. I'm a junior, and I've been in mock trial since freshman year. And between freshman year and sophomore year, the amount of progress we've made has been immense. Last year, we practiced on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays for about an hour and a half for each practice. Those practices lasted from September until February. So if you do the math, that estimates about 170 hours. And that doesn't even include our competitions. Our competitions are about 4 hours, and we competed 8 times. So at an additional 32 hours, that's over 200 hours of putting our time and dedication into this club. Our club should not be comparable to the clubs that meet once a week for 25 minutes. We should be considered an academic club not only because of the amount of time we put into it, but because of the level of difficulty this club presents. We compete against other schools, and we perform a trial. We deserve to be looked upon as a competitive academic club, and that our advisors should not be compared to those of clubs that meet once a week, because mock trial and its members deserve much more than that. Not only have we competed, we have won competitions, 7 times to be exact. We won 7 times against other schools. We travel to real courtrooms. We practice in front of real-life judges. We are judged in front of real-life judges, and we have actual attorney coaches that help us throughout the season. This club goes beyond what can be taught in the classroom and deserves academic praise. Coming out as number 4 out of 220 teams in the state was not easy to do, but with time, effort, dedication, and hard work, the members and the advisors of mock trial have made this club as competitive as real as possible. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Kathy Way, and I'm a current junior at Ridge High School. Last year, I joined the mock trial team, and I went in thinking that it would be an easygoing club where I could just hang out with my friends. However, last year, the club ended up being more than a club to me. It was something that challenged me, something that requires time, and something that requires effort. And for me, it became a commitment. Never did I see myself attending practices during winter break or meeting 5 times a week for hours at a time, or even spending countless nights memorizing my speeches, all for an after-school club. But I can guarantee you that this devotion that I had is in every single one of the members, and most of all, our advisors. They gave up hours each week, time they could have spent with their families, to work with us and to help us. When we scheduled Sunday afternoon practices in a law office at Watchung, Mr. Kohut was always the first one there. When our after-school practices would go 1 or 2 hours overtime, Mrs. Fox would always stay and support us. This is the reason why we're here today. We as a club are frustrated that even after the titles that we have won, the amount of effort required and the experience that this club provides, that we are still not recognized as an academic competitive team. We are frustrated that after the hours, the traveling, and the guidance that Mr. Kohut and Mrs. Fox have provided us, that they do not receive the stipend of an academic competitive team. It is embarrassing that we are told to credit ourselves on our accomplishments while the school still refuses to acknowledge them. And today we are here to demand that the treatment of our club and our advisors need to change. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else for public comment on non-agenda items?
board members. My name is Archana Kapoor. I'm from 23 Talmadge. I wasn't here to just speak. I was just a driver for some of these kids. But seeing their passion, just want to say as a parent who just drives these kids to different places, I have seen my son, who's come from a different state in 9th grade, go from a shy, very shy and inhibited child to very open, and Rohan was my son here, and that's because of mock trial. And I have seen both the teachers perform their duties dedicatedly. They would never look at their watches. All they wanted to do was make these students work, perform to their best ability. I was heartbroken when Rohan came 2 weeks back and said, Mom, my club may be closing. And I'm like, but you guys just did so well. You came 4th in the state. And he says, yeah, but it seems like it doesn't matter. So I hope you guys, and I know you hear, everybody who comes here, and I know all of you are volunteers, and we appreciate the work you all do here. I hope you will hear what these students have to say, and I hope we can keep this club alive, because the teachers are already so overworked in our schools, and those are regular teachers, and for them to go all out and perform these duties, without those 2 teachers, this club is not going to work. So I hope you're able to do something for these students. Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else for public comment? No? Okay, at this point, I'll close public comment. Did you want to respond?
So thank you to our students that came to join us tonight, and I didn't catch your name, but thank you for the driving. I know that a lot of our parents do a lot of driving so that our kids can have these experiences, and I think a lot of folks sitting up here on this stage have been privy to a lot of that personal experience of driving kids around, so thank you for doing that. Just a couple thoughts. One is that nothing worth having ever comes easy. Secondly, as far as personnel matters are concerned, the board cannot address personnel issues in public. I appreciate the feedback that you gave about our staff. I agree with you. I think we have amazing staff. As far as considerations about stipends, things of that nature are subject to negotiations, and they're really not something that we can discuss in public. So I hope you understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. We are up to board forum at this point. Mrs. Gray?
I just want to say that I know there's a few people here that were at the strategic planning on last Monday, and it was a really impressive turnout. Thank you especially to all the staff members. There were tons of them, and it was fantastic to see everyone there, and there were parents and students, and it was just great. Hopefully the next one will be just as well attended, and we will hear more ideas exchanged, great ideas, and that our work product will be better for it.
Thank you. And I'll just chime in, if you didn't make the first session and you want to come to the second and or third session, you can read on the website. There's a link on there to click that has all the notes, as Mr. Markarian mentioned before, so you can get caught up as to what the discussions were at the first time. So, definitely plan on coming if you're interested. Mrs. Werner, you had something?
Yeah, and actually the one segment of our community that I felt was underrepresented at our strategic planning meeting were our actual students. So for those of you who are here tonight, take note and tell your friends, because I think many of us feel that your input is more valuable than just about anyone else's. I want to thank the students who took the time to come out tonight. I think I probably was listening to a few future lawyers, if not all future lawyers. And like Mr. Markarian said, we really aren't able to comment on personnel matters, but I do want to comment on something Mrs. Kapoor said. We are listening very closely to the feedback that we are receiving tonight, so thank you for taking the time to give it.
Thank you. So we want to have our attorney, Mr. Crute, give a few thoughts. We've had some questions this week about the rental of our PAC, this room, for an event, and I know we had responded to, Mr. McCarrion had responded to a number of emails questioning what our policy is for the use of schools for events and in specific things having to do with politics. So we just thought we'd kind of clarify for people the difference between our different kinds of policies. Several people had emailed about policy. What is the number of the policy?
4233.
4233. Thank you, Mrs. Gray. That's a policy that talks about, it's specifically in the staff section of our policy manual, and it talks about political activity during the school day involving staff members. So that's a very specific policy. We have a more general policy about facilities use that is more applicable to the situation where someone wants to rent our facilities for an event. We do rent our facilities to members of the public and groups who want to use it. Obviously, first priority always goes to our school and our students. If there's an activity going on here, like a concert for students, we don't rent it out. But if it's available, we do rent it out to other people. So I'll just have Mr. Crute speak briefly as to the policy.
Sure.
Thank you. I have a tough act to follow after the mock trial team. But I just wanted to comment on a few things. As the board president indicated, the board policies that deal with political activity are in the 3,000 and 4,000 sections of the policy manual, which are sections that deal with political activity that could affect the students, either through employee speech or through activities that are brought into the school during the school day. And that's an area in which the school has a lot of discretion to control the speech and to protect the students. However, the policy that deals with outside groups is a facilities use policy, which is policy 7510. And there's also a regulation that goes along with that. And that policy is very different. That policy does not specifically address or restrict the use of the facilities of the district for any particular kind of speech, and there's no restriction in that policy with respect to political activity or political speeches. And this actually is an issue related to the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And the distinction that the Supreme Court of the United States has made, I'm just going to go through very general terms here, but the distinction that they have made with respect to public facilities and speech, including public schools, relates to whether the school has created a public forum or whether it's a non-public forum. And the law basically provides that if school districts don't open their doors to any outside activity whatsoever and simply don't allow any outside groups to use the facilities, then that would be considered a non-public forum, and the school would have a lot more, the district would have a lot more leeway to restrict specific types of speech or specific speakers or specific ideas or issues. But on the other hand, if the district does allow outside groups to use the facilities, then the district has created a public forum, and there are different levels of public forum, but when you create a public forum, then under the First Amendment, it would be impermissible and it would be viewed with what the courts call very strict scrutiny to restrict specific types of speech or the content of speech absent some very compelling state interest. And here in the district, in order to determine whether we have a public forum or not, there's two things that you look to. One is the policy, and the policy is in place, and the second is sort of the practice or the past practice of essentially how we have allowed the facility to be used in the past. And looking at both of those things, I'm pretty comfortable, and it's my opinion, that the district does have a public forum with respect to the speech that it allowed, not speech so much, but the use of the facilities. And essentially, in the case of this specific event that's coming up, and in the case of all of our events, in the board policy and regulation, there's a specific process that groups or individuals that want to use the facilities have to abide by. There is an application process. There are fees that are imposed in many circumstances. There's requirements with respect to insurance coverage. There's requirements with respect to providing for security and other things if it's necessary. And groups are treated equally with respect to their ability and opportunity to have access to the facilities. As the president indicated, obviously if there's a conflict with a school activity or some other reason that could prevent a group from being approved. But when you review the policies and specifically the acceptable use policy, and when you look at the practices and what types of events have been allowed in the district, and a wide variety of cultural events, athletic events, outside groups of various natures have been allowed to use the facilities, including a number of groups with respect to expression of ideas, discussion of topics that were relevant to the community. Some political groups have rented space in the district on prior occasions, including groups from both political parties. There have been candidate forums and other issues of political nature that have been held in the school facilities. So when you combine that with the language of the policy, it's my opinion that the district really cannot censor or prevent particular types of speech, like political speech, for instance, under the way that the things are structured here and the way that the policy has been adopted. And I just want to make it clear that in no way is the district endorsing any particular viewpoint or activity, nor is the district sponsoring this event. This is an event that an outside group used the district's process for renting the facility, and that's the reason that it's being held here. It's not a district-sponsored event, and it's not a district-endorsed event. And the U.S. Supreme Court has made it clear that in cases like this, with political speech and even with religious speech, which has even greater protection in some ways because of the Establishment Clause, that merely not censoring an activity and allowing it to take place does not in any way imply that the district is endorsing or sponsoring the event. And the Supreme Court has even recognized that even high school students can appreciate and recognize that permitting an activity is not the same as endorsing an activity. So in this case, basically, under the law and under our policy and practice, the event has been approved, was approved through the administrative process, and I do not believe that there would be any constitutional basis to rescind that approval and change the decision that was previously made.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Crute. Any questions from the board? That was pretty clear. Okay, thank you. Is there anything else for board forum? Okay, we're up to adjournment. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. Sorner and Mrs. Wooldridge. All in favor? Aye.